Hi everyone, I am Swagata Ashwini and I'm back with another episode for the Data Dojo. And today I'm extremely thrilled to have Pauline to our podcast. Pauline has been working with different companies and in Apple and in eBay, and she was working with Yahoo as well. She has a decade of or more of experience in the data science field. Even before this field was, becoming so popular, she's been in this field and she's been deeply involved in knowledge management, information networks, and recently with her experience with Siri. So she is going to help us and guide us more into what she envisions the future of AI and language technologies and how it's going to shape the digital landscape in the future. So, Pauline, I'm very excited to have you and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with the audience. Would you like to add on to your introduction and what you've been working on in the past few couple of months?
Yeah, well, last couple of months I've been retired from Apple, but thank you very much for having me, and I'm very excited to be part of this podcast. My career spans, many decades, and I actually started in artificial and worked. I worked in academia for a while, then I came to the US and worked for SRI International. I got to work on a variety of projects, including a project for an intelligent assistant, and I was involved in the intelligent calendar scheduling part. Then I went on to work for, yeah, as you said, Yahoo, startups, eBay, and finally Apple. And the strange thing is, the assistant technology I worked in, Siri, in SRI, became Siri. So it felt like a full circle.
Well, wow, awesome. Awesome. So, I mean, I'm very curious, like you've worked in different countries, I believe, and you've worked in academia and you've transitioned to industry and you've transitioned even to a leadership position. So, in all of these experiences, like how did you, if you had to give advice to young aspiring data scientists or people in the mid-management who are kind of figuring out whether they want to continue being technical or going to the leadership position, what questions should they ask themselves and how should they kind of navigate that leadership journey versus being an IC?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Now, I've always been a technical leader, and that is something that suited Apple really well because it's really an engineering-led or company. So I didn't let go of that technical background. But I think the big question to ask yourself is, are you happy? Do you like people? I mean, if you like people, then that means you probably will transition to management a little easier than someone that's not so keen on working with people and developing people. Management is not just about giving people tasks. It's
Yeah.
really about development of a team and people. And so I would say that's a big question. The other aspect of it is, do you like to be somewhat in control of your work and your workspace and your work environment, and you're very interested in pushing forward technology, but you're not so interested really in dealing with people problems,
Yeah.
then you might be more well suited to the tech world. But I think for everybody, for me, I've always felt there's three kind of things to think about. One is, do the job that you've been given and do it well, and that's how you're going to be evaluated. That's how you're going to grow in the company that you're working in. They have to rely on you. The second one is, always look for just something a little bit different to differentiate yourself, whether you run a podcast, even an internal blog, or if you solve a problem that your team has been having, or just look for something to contribute that's a little bit extra. And then
Sure.
finally, always learning, whether it be, going on courses, which is great at the beginning of your career, especially, but
Yeah.
also good at the end of your career,
Yeah.
or just meeting the people. If you see someone sitting across the corridor from you, do you know what they do? Go and ask them.
Yeah.
So that's the type of three things I would give as advice.
I agree. I mean, I also feel like people of in my age group who are like trying to figure out that question, and that's why I partly asked you that question. The technology is changing at such a fast rate. Like I am working in the AI space, and every week there is something new. There is this RAG architecture, and there is new LLMs coming up, fine tuning. It
Yeah.
gets so overwhelming to learn. So I'm like, should I, be in the technical space because it's exciting, because it's challenging, but at the same time, I'm missing out on the aspect of collaborating and working with people. So it's very like difficult to balance that. And like you mentioned, like go out and ask people what they've been working on and trying to do extra things. That really does help. Like even with podcasting or blogging or collaborating, that are the ways. Those are the ways that I'm actually able to collaborate with people because at work it's so overwhelming that I finish my task and then, oh, I need to learn this, I need to learn this, I need to do this course. So it's like it's tough to balance, but I really appreciate that you share like talking to people
Yeah,
and
as a data scientist, one of your main parts of your job is convincing people to change,
yeah,
convince people to alter their direction or just take account of data. And so one of the things when you're younger is really starting, just understand what other people's jobs look like. What are the stresses and strains behind them? Quite often you get data engineers and data scientists not working very well together
right.
because they have different expectations of each other.
Yeah.
And understanding the challenges, for example, a data scientist or an ML engineer,
Mm.
understanding the challenges that are facing the data engineer
Yeah.
will make them much more likely to collaborate more effectively, and vice versa, of course.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And compared to like a software engineering role, which has been there for decades, I feel the data science role is still kind of evolving with all these variations. Every company has different definitions of ML engineer, data scientist, data
Yeah.
engineer, so many variations. So I think we'll still take a couple of more years to make this a very mature role. So a lot of
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah, and it's not, I think it is something that will change with time, but and it has been changing all along. And I think the job of a data scientist today is way different from the job of an analyst, a data analyst in the past. And so, yeah, I think, but it's very exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I So another question I have for you is like, being a woman in tech or in AI space, I mean, still now I feel like it's still a minority and seeing like leaders like you've been in this field for such a long time. How was it for you when I'm sure it would have been an even more minority, when you started?
Yeah.
How was it like, and how do you see it's going to transition? Do you feel at some point we're going to get that diversity, inclusion
Oh,
to a state
I,
where it, yeah,
yeah, I think things are improving all the time. And my first conference as an academic was in Santa Barbara, and I was giving a talk, and I stood up to a room full of about 1.5 to 2,000 men.
yeah,
I could not see one woman in the whole audience.
yeah,
So it was a completely different environment. And I have some very funny stories, but maybe not for this audience, about working in all male environments. But I just got on with it, got on with the job, proved myself. I didn't worry too much about that. And I just was I had my blinkers on and I just worked hard. I think today people are starting to cope with diversity. And by the way, this is not just men and women, or it can be different types of people with different types of diversity issues or equality challenges, but they're starting to work out methodologies to get themselves, in the room, at the table, and in their way, and in a way that feels safe and strong for them. And of course, as managers, that's our job as well to help that and to recognize that, hey, I've never heard Bobby over there speak in a meeting,
yeah.
but if I send out the agenda in advance and have a shared document, he's
Mm,
very likely to put some comments down
yeah,
before the meeting. So, making sure that you support all different types of people, be they women or and men, or race, gender, whatever the difference is, being able to be supportive of everybody's modes of operation. Now, in data science, the problem is not so great. I would have to say that my latter teams were almost 50%
oh, that's
female.
right.
So data science, now, as you get into the AI, ML engineering, it's a little still very biased towards men, but it's changing and there are women coming in.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the other key thing is, recognizing that you won't, as a woman, and men, this happens to men too, but as a woman, there will be ebbs and flows in your work across time. And recognizing that that doesn't need to be, a disaster for your career. You can have those ebbs and flows. And when I was at the latter part of my work at SRI, I worked only 4 days a week. And I
Mm,
have to say, for those 6 years, I probably stayed still as far as career progression was concerned.
mm,
But once I took off once I went back to full time and had the energy and time to give to work as opposed to family. And I think
yeah.
recognizing that that's fine. Your work life balance can ebb and flow. Is okay. Don't panic about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a very good point because I've seen like as women we tend to like have a very we want to be more planned and organized when it comes to we need to give time to our family, whether it's marriage or taking care of the children and all of that. Whereas for men I mean, I'm not saying that they don't, but it's like not a big worry for them. And we kind of assess the situation and, oh my God, I'm not, the guilt of not giving enough time to the family. And we tend to even underestimate ourselves. Like even while applying for job, I've seen women need to checklist all the required criteria. That's, yeah, it's certainly like we need to give empower women to be more confident in general.
Yeah, I can give you a little example of this. So I was applying for a job and or I had been actually headhunted. I'm looking at the job description and think, God, I don't know any of this. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe about, maybe I could get hold of about 20 to 30, maybe 40% of the job, but the rest is all going to be new. And my husband said to me, he's a very successful executive. He said to me, I've never gone for a job where I knew more than 30% of the new job. You
Wow.
know, so he's just like, he's saying, I know I've got a foundation, I've got my basics. I'm going to learn new things in this new job. And I think I can do it. And women tend to underestimate
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
And I think we should not be scared of part of the job that we don't know. We've proven that we can learn fast. We can do all the things that we've been doing in our previous job.
Yeah.
Sell that as your ability to move forward. And
Yeah.
so I think that's important not to downplay our ability
Yeah.
as women, and then as I wanted to pick up on a wee point that you said about men and women and the balance of life. Some of that's changing. As a woman, we should be sensitive to men's situations as well, and they can be complex as well. So just as we ask them not to judge and not to be biased, we
Yeah.
we also should be open and non-biased with all of our employees. Yeah.
Agree. Absolutely agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, like I have like this, I'm a chapter lead for women in data in San Francisco, and a lot of women are trying to transition to a data role. And every time they come and say like, hey, do you have can you refer me to this company or do you have any connections? And I see like they have this list of experience and the role they're applying for. I'm like, why are you applying to this role? You can do much better. And they're
Yeah.
like, no, maybe, I want to take it slow because my family needs. And I know when I get like a little bit bonding with them, I ask like, does your partner also think like that? Or, it's mostly the women. I know it's changing, but these platforms and communities make us talk to them and give them confidence like, hey, it's a partnership and it needs to change and it is changing, but you have to be confident that you
Yeah.
can be a team and it's not like only you have to compromise.
Yeah. Although it's, there's no, sugarcoating it. It's hard. It
Yeah.
is hard to mix career and family life. And as I said, you've got to sort of take the rough with the smooth a little bit. But one of the things that I think it was Sheryl Sandberg said, when you're about to plan to start your family, a lot of women lean back. That's what she calls it. They lean back because they think, well, don't want to make any moves now because I think I'm about to, get pregnant or have a family. And instead, that's exactly the point that you should be leaning forward. You will never want to go back to a job that doesn't challenge you, that isn't enjoyable, that isn't exciting.
Right.
And so going back to a new challenge, the next step in your career rather than, a job that you were bored with,
Yeah.
because, it is the right thing to do. And we can rise to the challenge, not just women, everybody can rise to the challenge.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of new parents say like, hey, because of this new phase of our life, we become more conscious of our time and, time management skills have improved.
That's
So,
right.
yeah.
And that's right. I think that is often the case that we get a lot done in a shorter period of time. But I have to say that, as far as inclusion and diversity is concerned, it's not just about women and men, and it's about a whole load of other aspects. Now, for example, I think the first step is always to make sure you're getting a diverse set of candidates in your pipeline. Now, that takes work. It takes work because you might have an HR department. They're used to sending you, you say you'd like maybe a master's, you'd want this skills, and they
Yeah.
go and look for all of that. So what you tend to get is a very one-dimensional set of people coming in, especially in data science, where we're often asking for PhDs or masters. And one of the things we have to recognize, especially in the US, the brightest minds coming out of school go and get a job.
Yeah.
They are not the ones necessarily, well, of course, some do masters and some do, and of course, many do PhDs, but
Right.
many of the brightest minds want to get out into the workplace. And
Mm.
we're missing them if we don't also look at those candidates. Similarly, for race, the opportunities to get the same background may not be there for all of our partners in this society, but that doesn't mean they don't have wonderful minds and in data science, where things are changing all the time, where learning and curiosity is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Sometimes that's what we want to look for, and not, oh, they've ticked the box of a master's and a bit of experience here. And you see what I mean?
Absolutely. I agree with it so much because, like I've seen people who have come from psychology background, pivot to data science, and
Yes.
the insights that these people have is very, very useful, more useful than someone like me who's followed the traditional path, like computer science, data science, and being in that, and also people from different cultural backgrounds, like from US or different countries. When all of these people come together, the quality of the product or solution you're building
Yeah.
has taken all the perspective. So it's very important for companies to realize that don't just be so strict about or rigid about masters in CS, PhD in CS, be or just focusing on number of years of experience. It's so important to have like a diverse team.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I think the strongest data science teams are diverse data science teams. And if we look at something like, one of the most exciting workers I ever had spent 20 years working in NASCAR.
Wow.
And he came in, but he had this enthusiasm and curiosity, this
Yeah.
perseverance to find the problems that was so much, it gave so much to the whole team.
Mm.
So yeah, I agree. Different backgrounds, economic backgrounds, different race, different, I mean, I would say ethnicity,
Mm.
all of that's good. And make sure your pipeline also includes the white male. And I'm saying that because in recent years, the whole data science field, is becoming something where you might get a lot of people from China, from India, and from the US, and it starts to not necessarily look that diverse. And you look around and you think, oh,
Ah,
I don't have any white men in my team.
yeah, yeah,
I'm talking about a very large team, not about small teams.
I
And
agree.
so when you're thinking, so don't stick with recommendations. You might have recommendations from your team. Great, go
Mm.
interview them, but make sure you have other pipelines. I think that's important. Anyway, that's just me.
Very valid points.
Yeah.
So, like, I wanted to pivot to something which is like a hot topic these days, which is about, ethical and responsible AI. And, we're trying to come up with these ethical and bias, you should not have bias, but I haven't seen a lot of companies actually, strictly implement it. It's still a lot of theory and good practices. So, what are your thoughts on it? Like, how important is it and how can company easily adopt it?
Yeah, it's very, very important. And I think that a lot of the big companies that are actually working on LLMs, for example, Google and Apple, absolutely, and OpenAI and Microsoft, they're all thinking, and some of the universities now are really starting to try and create benchmarks and things for various different ethical aspects of building AI. Let's look at just how this applies to the data science side of the world. What are we scared of? We're scared of hallucination, right? So I remember when OpenAI first came out, I typed in a question about what are the 10 most important historical events in the US? And the answer seemed pretty good. Then I asked for the same thing in France. First few answers sounded good, and the latter answers were like, what? How did they get that? But so hallucination, content safety. So we're talking about things that are socially toxic, like hate speech or violence or erotic content or bullying. I'm trying to think of all these sorts of things. There's accuracy as well. Now, would you trust an AI system that told you I am 99.9% accurate? Would you trust that more than one that said I'm 90% accurate? There's a tendency to believe, oh, if it's 99% accurate, it's always accurate. But 90, oh, I'm going to check my facts. So you've got to start thinking about all of those types of, and of course, bias. Bias is huge. And even before the large language models came out, this was a big problem. And we have to start to try and address that. So where does a data scientist address it? Well, the three main areas, I think. There's the data, the input data. Where do we get it from? How do we get it? Do we have the right to that data? Is it somebody else's data? Are we verifying and validating some of our sources? Are we building detection systems to filter out all that stuff I was talking about before? Do we segregate our data that comes from different sources? Are we careful that we're not reinforcing, where all the data we're getting is actually from the same source? Are we checking for that? And of course, we have to segregate our LLMs too. We don't want them to cross-contaminate one another. And then we have to control access to all that sensitive data. So the input stuff is really difficult. I don't think people realized how difficult it was.
Yes.
And you can hear by all these artists that get upset that their images are being used, their writing is being used,
Yeah.
So that's the data. The second one is while we're building and, we're doing our fine tuning and all of that, how do we evaluate and create that iterative loop that's positive? And a lot of people are relying right now on human evaluation of models. And so we can bring in all the same issues and problems, but humans, they tend to learn a task, and if they get very familiar with that task and with the purpose of that task, they become more and more biased. If we pick people from all look the same or sound the same, they naturally have their biases entering into their assessment. We should be doing risk assessment at this point as well. What do we think the social and economic impacts are going to be? There's some ways of measuring bias, but got a long way to go on that. And again, accuracy. And then the last one, which people forget a little bit about, is if you're building something, a product from this LLM, or the LLM is being used itself, is it actually matching with your business or content policies of your company, or even the way you write, the way your company composes a sentence? So all of that. And then finally, the bit that I'm most interested in, and I have been my whole career, is really the downstream evaluation, the ongoing assessment. So this includes both human and quantitative assessment. I'm very much more interested in have more experience in the quantitative side, but both are very important. And, how do we experiment with these systems? And with real people, especially if that data content is private, how do we do that? How do we assess bias, accuracy, patterns of use, impact, etc.? I could go on for ages. But I'm sure you agree.
I mean, we've seen like these, as you mentioned, like big tech companies and a lot of universities are putting out these benchmarks and frameworks on how to take care of bias and diversity and making sure the source of the data and everything that you mentioned. But even the smaller and mid-sized companies, like where I'm coming from, we are still struggling to incorporate it in practice. And we see all these, it's not given, I guess, as much importance as it should be, because we are in a rush. I mean, we are trying to evaluate LLMs, put out our services, put out our features. We are not taking into account that, like you mentioned, even if our system is, hallucinates a little bit, it's fine, as long as we get it out there. So yeah, it's we have a long way to go in terms of getting this particular ethic and responsible AI important in our features.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. And so, being able to measure, and give an assessment, I think is a risk. So if you're using this project, it's like medicine, there's a risk of X, Y, and Z if you take this medicine. But, and then the general education of the public on statistics is also, something we really need to do more of, I think. Anyway, so that's, yeah, I agree with you very much on that, on all of those points. Yeah, it's difficult, but it's difficult for the smaller companies, I agree. But the companies building the large LLMs are really big companies at the moment, or the big ones are, and they absolutely have to pay attention to all these issues, including privacy. And one thing I can say about Apple is privacy is front and center in everything Apple does. It's not seen as a challenge, it's seen as an opportunity. The opportunity is to build the technology of the future that we want, us humans, we want, not that the tech companies want. And I think that, that has to be fundamental, not just to the way we get our data, the way we assess things, but also the way we build our products as well.
Absolutely. Very well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, I want to pivot and ask you something which I had a personal question was, I always had a regret of not pursuing a PhD.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now that I see the pace at which things are moving, it kind of makes me wonder, like, is it still a good idea to pursue, PhD? And like you've transitioned from academia to industry, and I want to know like some of the things that you learned at academia are still like really good learnings that you implement on your corporate industry life. And yeah, what would you advise for people who are in this dilemma?
Yeah, well, now a PhD is not necessary for success in anything. And, but some of the things that you learn doing a PhD are things that you can pick up yourself and do. And those include things like doing background research, reading papers, actually acquainting yourself with what's going on in the environment. I would say my academic experience gave me a head start in assessing things like managing complexity and understanding the complexity of problems, and then looking at complex solutions. So I think it gave me a head start there. It also, taught me to listen, read. So listen to other people's point of view, read other, and critically assess them. So I think that's something all of us can learn to do. It's not, I mean, they call it arguing in the academic space, but it's not like shouting and screaming at each other, but it's more about presenting your options or your point of view and then listening to the others and being able to adjust. And I think that stood me in really good stead when I became a more senior manager as well. But yeah, that's that confidence. So it gave me that
Sure.
and that discipline, but that's something anyone can learn and implement. So I would encourage you not to feel downhearted, but go out and learn more. Go out there and get those papers and start reading them. Look at the sources of the materials and go check them too, because you might be reading a review of something, but really it's the sources that are interesting, and I think that's a key aspect to it all. So anyway, yeah, and for me, it also helped me a little bit because I was in a multidisciplinary sort of space, so it helped me understand how to approach an area that I've never really studied before. So yeah, I don't know, is that helpful? Now, anyone can go back and do a PhD if you're really interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have to think about it. But yeah, I mean, people who are interested like me who didn't get a chance, there's absolutely a very good opportunity in research, writing papers, and even the job. Like there are so many research scientist roles or things like that, which you can get similar experience of doing a PhD.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and even if you're not in a research position, but
Mm.
you're interested, what's that happening? What's that type of LLM? What does that mean? Or,
Mm.
go and read about it. You can do that yourself. And I think that's important.
Yes, very well said. All right. I have one last question, and yeah, you should just ask almost all of
Oh,
my.
yeah.
What do you think? Is AI going to take up our jobs, or is going to make it better? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think right now it's not really taking away masses of jobs, but I do think it's going to change jobs.
Mhm.
And if you can imagine, right, I'll give you a scenario. Let's think of a big bank,
Mm.
and they do economic assessments of a business, and they have all these people, or maybe even here we are. I think of a distribution company. This is a better example. So you've got a distribution company like Amazon, and they're assessing who's buying what at all times. They have all of these analysts doing this. It's mostly linear analytics, but these people are out there doing the analytics or planning for all sorts of things, like how many of these products are going to be sold, how many of this, how much and across the world, how much wood is going to be needed. People are doing that all over the place, and those kind of jobs may go. So AI might instead of needing 200 people, you might only need 20 people to do that. So I think there's going to be a redistribution over time. And the thing is, what big companies will be affected too. Apple will be affected, Google will be affected. So what they should be looking at is how do I help my employees whose work is going to go transition to roles that are going to work in the future. And I think that's something we should be thinking about now, and working on now, um, because I don't think people are going to be there's going to be hey, we used to employ 80% of our people, and now we're only going to employ 20. I don't think it's going to be that like that, but it's going to change the shape
Of course.
we
Agree.
work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you answering all those questions. I'm gonna move to a fun section that I call the rapid fire section. I'm gonna ask you 10 questions, and you have to whatever comes to your mind, don't
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, just first thing that comes to my mind.
your mind. Okay, first question. What is one tool or software that you felt was indispensable in your data science toolkit?
Uh, I would, okay. software probably was Python and now Spark maybe, and then Jupyter Notebooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone probably says the same thing.
Which pioneer in AI or technology has inspired you or most
Mm.
and it's a trick one.
Oh, okay. So this is going to be a strange one because it's actually way back in my research history. But there was a guy called Judea Pearl, who did work on probabilistic reasoning, and that was very helpful getting me into that space, which started my research career. So Judea Pearl.
Check. What skill do you think is crucial for every data scientist to master?
Okay. Well, so I would say presentation of their work.
Storytelling.
Particularly taking audiences from an analysis to the next step. I think often data scientists, especially young ones, they love presenting all their wonderful findings. People's
Yeah.
eyes glaze over halfway and they don't know what to do with it. So, making sure they know what the next step is, change and being able to therefore change the audience perspective of what they need to do next or what their product
Mm,
is, how their product is being used, maybe, for example.
got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Which application of AI excites you the most for future potential?
Oh. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk about stuff that I know about, right? So what really excites me and has excited me for years is the potential of assistant technology, intelligent assistant technology. And one of the things that really excites me just now is LLMs may allow us to very much simplify the ability for humans to human interaction, human to computer interaction, computer to human interaction. And so suddenly assistant technology might become extremely more useful. So imagine I'm trying to organize something like with you,
Yeah.
and you're on Google Voice or whatever, and I'm on Apple. Right now, the systems don't interact, but maybe with LLMs, I can send you my assistant can send you a text message, which your assistant can read
Mm,
and do something with, so you can imagine the power of that interconnectivity.
yeah, yeah, I like that. Um, what book on leadership or technology is significantly influenced you?
I never really read businessy sort of leadership books, although I've, had to do a few. So I'm going to go to fiction
Okay, sure.
because I read fiction all the time. And I think there's some books that have influenced me. Lots of books have influenced me. Some have influenced me in different ways. So I'll give you three. Yeah, I think I can think of three. One is The Parable of the Stores by Octavia something. I thought was absolutely brilliant. Octavia Butler. And sort of looking at how someone can emerge as a leader
Mm,
and what they do to gain the trust and confidence of people.
yeah.
Of course, Animal Farm, which gives you a lot of sort of understanding of management and leadership. And then one I've read really recently, which is a 3-book series. It starts with the 3-body problem. I think it's a really nice intellectual understanding of social and technology in the future and how it all might come together. So I like that as well. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that was pretty good. I think that's all I had, and we're almost running out of time. So thank you again for your time and sharing all your wisdom and knowledge. I'm sure the audience would love to listen and